Hey guys, 7K Vexus here once again. Uh, I gotta be quick because I gotta go. We are moving. I got a lot going on right now, and sorry for my apparel. I'm exhausted and just woke up. But I have something that I feel I need to share that I talked to God about in the shower. Several, oh gosh, this was a couple weeks ago, and I haven't known. I talked to my husband about it, but I haven't known how to put it online because I don't I don't always I'm not here for fame. I don't really like putting my face out there, to be honest with you, or my name out there. Most of the stuff that I do and I write and I make is it's anonymous because I don't always like people to hear my story or I that's just the way that I am. There's multiple reasons why, because there's a lot of things that I've said about my own life or about situations that I've been in that are true, and it embarrasses people that I know and love, family members, friends, different situations, different scenarios, all different types. And me just being me, being authentic and true, sometimes bothers people. So, and can expose things and behaviors that people don't want exposed. But like, I'm guilty of it, and the only way that you can get help is get counsel, to get I think they call it heavenly counsel, but it's basically, to go to counselors and go to authorities and get help. And the only way you can know something is wrong is kind of by communicating it with the community, with your figureheads, or with the authority members of your community, or other members, peers of your community, and seeing, is this normal? Because sometimes that's all people know. And I have a tendency to kind of say some things that can bother people's ego. So I do most of my stuff offline, or I do it under different pseudonyms or different um, anonymous identities, because I don't always like my story sounds dumb. And it sounds very far-fetched and it's very crazy, so I don't talk much about these things. So I'm not here to get online and just expose myself or expose anybody else, because I also understand the importance of keeping certain things sacred between you and other individuals and God, and being an accuser of the brethren. But I also understand that sometimes being quiet for too long allows behavior like that to be continued. So eventually somebody has to say something. But this was a conversation that I had with God in the shower about open doors and what open doors really are. And the way that it was being explained when I was trying to talk to God and ask for better insight on what are open doors, like this whole phrase of open doors, and spiritual doors. And sometimes, like, you'll have dreams, and before I even knew what open doors were and the doors were portals and stuff, you'll have dreams about people showing up, and it's through a doorway or through this, or they're asking to be invited, like vampires, through the door, through the threshold. So doors are very important in the spiritual realm and in real realm, but also trying to understand it on a electrochemical, biological standpoint, a psychological standpoint, the way that our bodies are built, the way God built our bodies, and how they function in this realm. It came to me as open doors are basically like neurons. They're like it, you get new information into your brain. I believe it's through your thalamus, and the glutamate processes that through the thalamus, and that's why you got to eat sugars, good types of sugars, not refined sugars, but good types of sugars, and some carbs and stuff, a little bit, and fats to keep your brain going, to keep the myelin sheath strong. It's made up of fats and sugars and glucose. So what God was reflecting to me is that you take information in, these new sources of information, stimuli, whether it's from the spirit realm or it's things that are physical, and they both can converge, because whatever happens on in the spirit a lot of times will manifest itself here and work through people here. So there's a convergence of that, and you're taking in new information all the time, like the wind blowing and your goosebumps come up. It's your biofield. Your skin is one of the hugest parts of your hugest one of the largest parts of your immune system, and it's you constantly have osmosis, things passing through your skin, and you're absorbing that information, and it transmits up to your brain, up to your thalamus, and that has to process that information, like when you smell something, and it has to put it into a different part of your brain and store it. And not just, it has to figure out where to store it. It has to process it in order to figure out the parts of the brain to store it in for long-term memory. Some people can't do that. Like people with ADHD have a much harder time storing the stuff from their limbic system, from their thalamus into the rest of their brain. It's a lot of free-floating information. Also, people with schizophrenia have the same issue. There's leaky information, so it's free-floating information that's not fully getting absorbed into the back of the brain, to the other parts. When you're absorbing this new information through the neurons, through the open doors, through all these open channels and tubes, and then those tubes go into the doorways, into the neurons, and then there are other doorways, other extensions, because a neuron is like this. It's like a ball with little fingers coming out of it. And those fingers have synapses and dendrites on the ends, and they don't even touch each other. They're like this close. And they still transmit electrochemical information. Hormones pass through there, chemicals pass through there and transmit information electronically, biochemically. So the information comes through a doorway into the center of the neuron, and then it has to get processed through one of the other doorways, through one of the other channels, and then that goes to another channel that connects with another synapsis, and then that comes into another neuron and gets into the center of that neuron, and then has to be processed and eventually travel to other locations. And when it processes this piece of information in the neuron, it's processing olfactory information, sight, memories, and this is new information coming in, and then it transmits to other neurons in other parts of the brain that hold deeper memory, long-term memory, things that you've blacked out too. And so that information passes through the center of the neuron and goes to another neuron. And it chooses which neuron it goes to based on the type of information that it's getting, the type of stimulation. And when it goes to one of the old neurons, it categorizes that. It mixes this stimuli with how many other stimuli have I encountered that are exactly like this? How many other patterns and similarities have I been through that are like this before? And so each neuron, when it catches that information, it'll send it to another location, and it'll categorize part of it in another neuron. And what's interesting is, and that's part of why when you have the short-term memory of what's going on, and then it gets stored in somewhere long-term in a different neuron that has all sorts of other information from different memories that are similar to it. And then so you go through something else. Like let's say you went through a trauma, it stored it in one type of neuron, and then you don't think about it ever again. And then you go through another trauma, like a family member is sick and you know they're dying, or you go through a car accident, or you lose everything, like massive traumas. It's processing that information, storing it in familiar neurons, and then it goes into those old neurons. It's being processed as a trauma. So where does that go? Familiar neurons, familiar doorways, familiar pathways. And so it goes into those other neurons that store those other traumas. And all of a sudden, you start having flashbacks to previous traumas while you're already enduring a new trauma. And you're like, why am I having flashbacks to a situation where I was abused, or a situation where someone died, or and you're having flashbacks to like 20 different memories that aren't even connected in timeline. or in situation. How they're connected is how your brain processed it. It processed it as a trauma, or as a good moment, or as a so like every time you smell something, like from your childhood, you'll smell something and you're like, this is familiar. I don't know what this is. And you can't remember what it is, and you have to categorize it and subcategorize it over and over again to get to the neurons that will bring back pieces of information where, like, you're just having a memory of being in a diaper playing with a toy that smelled exactly like this. And you don't even remember everything else that was going on in the situation. You just remember that little part, because that part of the memory got stored in a different place, and another part of the memory got stored in another place. It's especially if you're neurodivergent, if you're autistic, or you've been abused, you get splits, like borderline personality, or narcissistic personality, multiple personality. Your brain will split based on the traumas that you go through. And so, and keywords and certain triggers will make your brain split, and you'll go into different locations. And that's dangerous, because people with this part who've been traumatized that much, that split into a cluster B, they wind up with, and we don't know what they go through, so forgive them. It's some of the hardest things to deal with, are people are individuals that have cluster B personality issues, and they got that from trauma. So forgive them. They got to process it and get better. There are ways of cognitive behavioral therapy to get better, but they'll split, and then they'll do a specific behavior. This is how, like, hitmen and assassins are trained, is they'll split. They'll be pushed into a split, and then they'll behave certain ways. Like, they'll know how to take a gun apart, and they'll know how to assassinate somebody, and they'll do that action, or whatever, the sexual sin, or whatever it is, the degrading yourself. You dissociate from your own self. You pull your own soul out, and then start behaving however that spirit wants you to behave. And they're familiar pathways, and you kind of, it's muscle memory. You start acting that way and doing that, and then you start performing in that, and then when you come back from the split, you don't even remember what you did. You don't even remember you did that, because now you're another person. Now you're another personality, and you're accessing different parts of your brain, different neurons that cannot be accessed in that other brainwave, whether it's theta, whether it's beta, alpha, gamma. You can't access those particular traits and memories of whoever that personality is in that particular brainwave. They have to move you to another particular brainwave, which is part of what they were also doing in the GATE program that I was in. They were like, now that I research it, they were transferring us, trying to transfer us from, like, one brainwave to another type of brainwave using frequencies and stuff. Headphones, putting music on, and using prompts, and trying to get us to basically leave our body and go into another brain state, and basically astral projection. I'm getting off topic here, but from what God was kind of putting into my thought process is that those are the open doors, and that when you go and listen to music that reminded you of where you were at a certain time, or something that you were doing, you might not even remember the actual memory, but you'll have a feeling. You'll have muscle memory, and you'll have this feeling or this sensation of what happened the last time that you watched that, or the last time you listened to that. And you'll throw yourself back into who you were when you were 10, who you were when you were 13. And all of a sudden, you were literally trapped in the state that you were there, and you're not even present. You're dissociated, because you're allowing your brain, you're getting new stimuli, and you're allowing your brain to categorize it into that trauma place, and understand it and process it again. And sometimes we have to do that and regurgitate that so that we can get through it and finalize that process, and move forward, but if you keep replaying it over and over and over again, that's part of what writing therapy is for, so you can get rid of that. If you keep replaying it over and over again and keep getting the new stimuli, you're going to keep having the same memories over and over again. So sometimes you need to, like, this is what some people through trauma therapy go through. You're going to be triggered. You're going to find things that are going to trigger you eventually. And so you're going to have to process this. or you're going to go through PTSD over and over again. You'll have to go hide and have a flashback for 20 minutes and not be able to go back into society. Not okay. So you have to go through these processes by understanding that you're going to have triggers. You're going to have stimuli that's going to remind other parts of your neurons, other open doors. Like my husband going past a place where he used to do drugs, or he used to do like do crazy things that I'm not going to talk. It's his story. And he'll pass that place and it's ghosts. It's just memories. All the times that those things happened. Like passing a place that you were abused over and over, a place that you did horrible things, and or horrible things were done to you. And every time you pass it, you feel sick. And it's because you're categorizing that neuronal memory. You're reopening that door to that old way. People, places, and things. We discussed this in AA, Narcotics Anonymous, and different types of 12-step programs. People, places, and things. And you got to try to avoid that and not be equally yoked, but there are times where you're not going to be able to avoid that, and you're going to have to address it. And so that's why sometimes, like, people who've they went through a trauma to a certain type of music or a certain type of smell, like the rodents who smelled cherry blossoms and then were electrocuted for 3 generations. And then by the 3rd generation, they wouldn't come anywhere near cherry blossom odor at all, because it would put them into PTSD, and they didn't even know why. Because they weren't even abused. The 3rd and 4th generation weren't even electrocuted for the cherry blossom smell. They just had the neuronal memory from their parents and their parents' parents who were abused every time cherry blossom came around. So when they smelled cherry blossom, they instantly got scared because of the neuronal memory of their family, their parents. You're born into the sins of your father, into their memory. And you get to the 3rd generation and the 4th generation, and eventually it sticks, especially if you get to the 5th, 6th, 7th generation and it has been put in there and bred in there. Guess what? After 7 generations of the same behavior, it's basically become your DNA for all your children. You have to backtrack that. You can't just neglect it, because there will still be a neuronal memory there, a muscle memory there. You have to backtrack it by reassociating the smell, the cherry blossom smell, with reward, instead of reassociating the cherry blossom smell with electrocution or with nothing at all. Because you reassociate the cherry blossom smell, they get the cherry blossom smell with nothing, and they still have like this gut feeling of something is wrong. So now you backtrack it with the 3rd and 4th generation of rodents. Please look this scientific experiment up. You backtrack it and start rewarding them with the cherry blossom smell. And once you get to their 3rd generation, which is now like the 7th generation of all of the rodents, you abused the first 3, you stopped, and then you started rewarding the last 3. You get to the 7th generation, now they like cherry blossoms again. This is how people get out of trauma, is you have to reassociate the trauma with something positive. With telling that trauma, expressing that trauma, seeing how it helps other people, seeing how it changes other people or changes you. Because you expressed it, you learn new ways to handle it, new ways of, okay, I get the stimuli. Someone says this to me or says this about me, or I see this thing that triggers me. I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to take that in. I'm going to process that, but I'm not going to agree with it. I'm going to say it is what it is, and it happened for a reason, and there was a lesson, a reason, and a season. And you reassociate it with the positive, and with the good things that have happened, and with the changes and the lessons that you learned, and all the amazing things that happened from that, not the bad things that happened from that. Because then you'll just be stuck in that cycle forever and ever and ever. And every time you're going to get triggered left and right, and you'll never move. You'll never do anything. You eventually have to reassociate whatever that trauma was. Like, you were hurt to a particular set of music, and so now, this was like a friend of mine, so every time she'd hear that music, she would have catatonia. She would black out. She would panic. And so you have to reassociate that song with positive things, like with going out with kids and hanging out with them and watching them dance and giving them glow sticks and hanging out with animals and petting animals and having a good trauma release session and a group, like a good group community that you can feel happy with, and associate that song enough times to break that cycle that your neuronal memory now no longer associates that with the trauma, or hardly does, and associates that with the recovery. instead. That's what I wanted to say about open doors. It's not just a spiritual thing, oh, open doors. It's also a bioelectrical chemical thing that is actually, these are things that are built into our body, that God built into our body to be, it's just like how computers work. And it I have nothing else to say. I got to go. I got a life to live. But yeah, I really felt like sharing that. I felt like it was really important. You guys take care. Wish me luck. I got to go to my little hobbit house. Bye.